Greetings and salutations, one and all. Welcome to the end of the night shift week. How you doing? It's the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew. Broadcast we call Real Talk, and this is how we close out the night shift week with the show we also know as Marlon's favorite night shift show.
Well, it's mass in the air now. Glad if you see people come together, all of we equal. Tell them run now. Hug up your friend and run now. All who believe in love now. Who can understand and already. Everybody in here is family. So as I hear so to play, to one up in the day, and then up in the day, rock them up in the day, everything in the day. Put my friend on up, we jumping up, boy. He's on it up, boy. I'm feeling like I ain't the boy. We jumping up, boy. He's on it up, boy. I'm feeling like I ain't the boy. Like we carry this, there's all that we need, yeah. Freedom and so calm music, tell them we live for this. There's all that we need, yeah. I say no, it's just another thing that I don't know. It's energy and I don't on the road, on the road. Glad if you see people come together, all of we equal, tell them run now. Hug up your friend and run now. All who believe in love now, who can understand and already. Everybody in here is family. So as I hear songs I play, to one up in the air, and then up in the air, rock them up in the air, everything in the air. Put my friend on up, we jumping up, boy. He's on it up, boy. I'm feeling like I ain't the boy. We jumping up, boy. He's on it up, boy. I'm feeling like I ain't the boy. We are going away. There's all that we need, yeah. Under all the problems we face, there's the greatest place. And if you agree with me, then let's go. It's just another thing that I won't know. It's energy and I go on the road, on the road. Glad if you see people come together, all of we equal, tell them run now. Hug up your friend and run now. All who believe in love now, who can understand and already. Like everybody in here is family. So as I hear songs I play, to one up in the air, and then up in the air, rock them up in the air, everything in the air.
You can tell for the sound of voice. A track called Perfect World.
I'm feeling like I ain't the boy.
As I make the connection with my guest for the night.
I'm feeling like I ain't the boy. Charlotte Street is it, Frederick Street feeling like it's the Avenue is it, Stadium is it, Savannah feeling like.
As she gets her camera positioned right.
Henry Street is it, Charlotte Street is it, Frederick Street feeling like it's the Avenue is it, Stadium.
Much better.
Savannah feeling like it's the
Oh, I forgot to take care of my formalities, my housekeeping. Let me take care of that before I get into the business. I want to say welcome to those who are tuning in on TuneIn Radio, the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew. Those on NIE Radio out there in New Jersey. Those locked in on Facebook Live. Hey, you guys on Facebook, remember it's only temporary, so don't get too comfortable. I'll make sure to post the link in the chat so So you can jump on over to PEMGTV.com, and big ups to those on PEMG already. How you doing? Well, like I said, this is the sound of voice. The track is called Perfect World. I want to say thank you to my segment sponsors. Starting off with Pulse Media Group. When being in a moment is priceless, give them a call. For innovative streaming and recording solutions, they have the answer for you. You have an event you want to stream live? A church service, a wedding, funeral, party, seminar, conference. Go ahead and give them a call. 754-999-6020. You can check them out on PEMG.com. Well, you can check out PEMGTV.com. But link them up on PulseEMG.com. If you want to take it a step further and have your own internet TV station, you can do that too. I want to say thank you to Althea and her Healing Heavenly Hands. Althea Isu is a licensed massage therapist that comes to you, operating out of Broad County, North Miami-Dade and South Palm Beach counties with over 20 years of experience. She comes to you COVID-free and she'd like to leave that way. You can give her a call, 954-655-9000, or email her at thealater@att.net. Outside of paying her, she only asks that you get off her table when she's done and go sleep somewhere else. Give her a call, tell her Kevin Stew sent you. I want to say thank you to Reggae Global Entertainment. Reggae Global Entertainment will take care of your bookings, handle your tour management, take care of your copyrights, publishing, trademarks, business registration, legal service referrals, music production, marketing and promotion, and so much more. Give them a call, 954-998-8034, or check them out online, reggaeglobalentertainment.com. Also want to say thank you to GMAC Music Solutions. GMAC will bring your events to life, providing sound, stage, light production services, musical equipment, PA systems, audio engineers, DJs, bands, musicians, singers. Give them a call, 754-307-GMAC. That's 754-307-4622. Or check them out online, gmacmusicsolutions.com. The Zone of Voice, the track is called Perfect World. And if there's one thing that we want to have, it's that of a perfect world. But is there such a thing? I don't know. Maybe we can talk about it and see how close we can get by the end of the night. But I have someone with me tonight who I've been waiting and waiting and waiting to have a chat with ever since I spoke with her husband. And then I heard, yo, you should talk to my wife. I was like, what? Yeah, he sold her good. She's there cheesing it all. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my guest for the evening, Dr. Subrena Smith. Subrena, I think you can take off your mute now. How are you? How are you? How are you? Welcome to the night shift.
I'm well, somewhat nervous, but I'm well.
Somewhat nervous? Come on.
Yes.
Now. What is there to be nervous about? It's just two people talking by Skype, you know.
That is true. That is true.
Nothing to be nervous about. By the way, it's only me. You know, it's you and me and a bunch of eavesdroppers. That's basically what it is. So you don't even have to worry about the eavesdroppers. So it's just you and me, right? So
Sure.
I'm so glad that I get to have you on tonight, and thank you for taking the time out to come and hang out with us and chit chat a little bit.
Sure.
To get us started, could you please just give us a little bit of a background into who we're talking? Just talking with. Just introduce yourself.
So typically, when I'm introducing myself, I say I'm Subrena Smith. I am a philosophy professor at the University of New Hampshire in the state of New Hampshire. Because in most settings, that kind of affiliation is sufficient for an introduction. But I think in light of uh, the show, it's worth saying a little bit more about my background. So I'm originally from Jamaica. I'm
Whoop
from
whoop whoop whoop
Westmoreland.
whoop whoop whoop. Out west.
Um, I've been in the States since 2000 with my spouse. Prior to that, I lived in England.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, as I say, professionally, I am a philosopher. Uh, I I'm what you call a philosopher of science, stroke a philosopher of biology, because I'm particularly interested in questions that come out of our understanding of biology and how that pertains to many of the things that we're interested in the social world.
Mm-hmm.
So I write, for instance, about evolutionary psychology, which is this discipline that is um, whose goal is to give evolutionary biological explanations of human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested in that discipline in part because I think that they get some things wrong. And I
Mm.
try to see what they get wrong and how they get these things wrong from a philosophical perspective. So I bring philosophy to bear on the sorts of questions that I'm interested in. Most recently, I've sort of found myself thinking a great deal about race. It's very interesting. For a long time, I've been interested in human differences, and I've actually written a paper that's not yet published
Mm-hmm.
about human differences, on human differences. But I hadn't actually quite connected that this concern that I have is really a concern about what people typically talk about when they talk about race, right? Because I find the whole race thing, if you're seeing me on Skype,
Mm-hmm.
you hear that I'm from Jamaica, then you have a sense of what I look like. Um,
Well,
and so it
you
might
don't
be
really
striking to,
have a Jamaican sound. Not to take anything away from you.
uh-huh, I don't.
there there is a little bit of well, I guess the properness about it puts you more British,
Huh. Well, it
but
might be because I spend almost a decade in England, so I guess, and those were still formative years, really.
got you.
Um, my spouse lived in England for 25 years. I have two adult children
Mm-hmm.
that were born in England,
Yeah.
and so they're British. And when I hang out with them, I guess I
The
pick up certain
a
things
little bit
from
of the
them.
cockney comes out, just a little bit.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you say I don't sound Jamaican. Sometimes when I'm talking to people who don't have a sense of Jamaica, they they say, I hear that you're from the Caribbean, and they will reel off a bunch of countries, and one of them is usually Jamaica.
Yeah.
But I always also hear them say Trinidad, and I think that that's one of the strangest because I'm like, I don't sound like a Trinidadian.
No, no. Trini is a little bit different, you know.
Yes.
But
So
yeah.
that's sort of me. I guess some unveiling, some more unveiling might emerge from our conversation.
Well, one of the things that strikes me, Sabrina, when in your introduction, your little overview, which is really a little based on how you were well sold by David. Big ups, David, by the way.
I'm sure he's listening and watching.
Oh yes, oh yes, and thank you for the support too, David. David tunes in as soon as I do a little bit of a Facebook live, even on my Saturday broadcast, my music broadcast. He'll jump on in and hang
Oh, I
out with
do
us. Yeah.
that. In his study, and I see him sitting in his comfort chair. Say, I'll go past, and he'll say, "I'm listening to Kevin Stew." And the secret ingredient tonight is, and he'll say, this particular reggae artist.
I love it. Thank you, David. Selling me. Oh, I need to give him a part of a promotions check. But much respect. Truly appreciate of it. When you say you looked at people and you do your what did you say philosophy of biology, because people get it wrong. When you say people get it wrong, what
Yes.
exactly do you mean? Because when it comes to understanding, I like to think of it as not right or wrong, but just don't understand. So when you say people get it wrong, what do you mean?
Right. So there are a couple of ways in which they get it wrong. So one of the things I talk about in my academic work is what I call the overextension of particularly evolutionary consideration to some
Ah,
domains that it just doesn't apply. So people want the theory to be elastic enough to do certain things that it can't do. And so that's one way of getting it wrong. But then there's another way of getting it wrong, which I think is really typically how people get things wrong. When they walk around and they talk about genes, that it's in your genes and there's a gene for that and a gene for this. And you're like, what the heck are you talking about? Or, they talk about racial genes that, black people, they all share the same things, genetic profiles in common, and vice versa for other races.
yes,
Um,
yes.
but there's a whole bunch of stuff that's wrong in there. And so those are some of the ways that those are at least two ways in which they get things wrong. The reason why I use the term wrong so much, if you look at many of the concerns that we have in our social world, if you just sort of zoom past the surface of what people are talking about and look at sort of what grounds, what holds up, where is this interest, this worry coming from? You typically find some kind of, in philosophy, or in philosophy we say, you find some kind of a biological grounding. That is some kind of a fundamental commitment
Right.
to what they think is going on in these cases from a biological perspective, right? So people want to say that, you are just brilliant, and your brilliance is, they're not inclined to think that it's something that you came to because you've been schooled and you have, you are a stick with it kind of a person, you will go the extra mile. They are inclined to think that, well, you have the kind of biological construction, the kind of brain that makes you brilliant. When they talk about abilities, think about the conversations that we saw when Usain Bolt was just killing everybody on the on
On the
the on
track.
the racetrack,
Yeah.
right? They were fancy, I call them fancy scientists, fancy biologists of all strikes, talking about slow twitch and fast twitch and the genetic profiles of Jamaicans and Africans, and they want to find an answer that makes this thing in the world that we're fussing about, that we're having these discussions about. They want to find an answer that shows that it is real. It's not something that is manufactured. It's not an artifact of what people prefer, what they like. It's just the result of hardcore biological goings ons.
Right.
And in the case of Hussein, he was lucky to have been given these biological gifts. And in the case of other people who don't have those gifts, well, they didn't get them from biology, right?
They worked hard for theirs. Usain got
well,
his genetically.
and this is the question: how do you discern when someone has worked hard from when someone has
Just gifted.
gotten this ability because it's just biology, right?
Right.
And of course, there is the sort of middle ground position that a lot of scholars, that some scholars take. They will say, well, it's neither one or the other. It's not either you wholly get it from biology. If Hussein was constructed as he is biologically and he never did do any practice, well, surely he wouldn't have performed as well as he performed. So it's both of these in conjunction with each other that's working. So I am particularly interested in, I'm always asking, what's really going on here? What is it you're fussing about? What is it, what's the basis of this worry that you have? And very often when we look carefully, we see something like a kind of concern of sorts with biology. And this could be a good concern that we want to say it's all about biology, or we want to say it's a bad concern in that biology gave you bad traits, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you are questioning those that had questioned it before and put out a theory, basically.
Yes. Yes.
See, this is why I knew that I would like you.
Sorry?
This is how I knew that I would like you, because I am constantly questioning things. Constantly.
Oh, yes. As philosophers, that is what we're pretty much trained and paid to do. The so-called taken for granted answers that, let's just go along to go along. We as a matter of our training, we ask questions. We seek questions to be asked, but also as a matter of disposition, as a matter of how I am as a person. It was kind of challenging in Jamaica because I would ask those questions, and people sometimes were frustrated with Subrena always bothering with these questions. Some questions you just don't ask.
Right.
My sister won't be on the phone with me when I'm talking about certain matters because she doesn't want when lightning strikes. She doesn't so much do it anymore, but several years ago I would be talking to her and the phone would go like just dead. And then I realized, she was just hanging up, and I call her back and she said, I'm not having any of those conversations with you because I don't want when the big guy decides that he's going to take you out.
But here's the thing, that the question that I ask as it relates to things when it comes to religion and religious beliefs. If the Creator gave us a mind that functions, one that asks questions, one that challenges theories, one that creates things, why would we not ask the question of what we are told about the Creator in and of itself? And
I think that's a very...
This is probably one of the things that your sister hung up on you for.
Exactly. Oh, yes.
Because I have those discussions.
Look, I think I think that's exactly the right question. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone given a good answer to that question. Yeah, I've never seen that.
I tell people all the time, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious. I grew up in church. I was active in church. I'm not religious. I've learned that I cannot be religious. For me, you can be religious if you want, and I'm fine with that. And a part of what I have grown to live by is what I created as a motto: to have acceptance through enlightenment.
Right.
And I created that when I did a broadcast on hate. And if you take the first letters of each of those words, it spells out hate. So I strive to have acceptance through enlightenment, at the core of it all is the enlightenment. So you have to come to an understanding of something in order to be enlightened about it. Now, we have been, when it comes to like things like religion, we've been fed a certain thing. Those who use the Bible, we have been fed that story all our lives, and we were just taught that okay, you just believe and just go with that. Don't question anything, just go with it. And it makes me think, okay, so in the other religions, is that what they do? They do too, because the stories are very similar in some of these religious books.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
you know, these are the kind of questions that I ask, and there are very few people that I can have that discussion with. And, but I guess it falls under the umbrella of the human differences. One of the other differences that has always bothered me is one that we'll be touching on quite often tonight, and it is that of race.
Yes.
I ended up doing a broadcast, and I'm trying to remember if it was before or after I spoke with David. Well, no, I have to be specific on which David, because there was a chat with David Barash that introduced me to David Smith, who introduced me to you.
Yes.
And I also have another David who is a consultant on the Rodney Reed case, a David Fisher. And my better portion would tell me, you and these Davids. Because whenever I get to talking with any of them, it ends up being this long thing. And she hears that I'm talking with David, and she's like, all right, see you tomorrow.
Exactly.
It could be the middle of the day. She's like, see you tomorrow.
I know. I know.
But here's the problem. Here's what she doesn't know. When she hears that I'm talking to Subrena, it probably will end up being the same thing. And it's even worse if she hears that I'm on the phone with David, and Subrena. You know? She'll just not even respond. She'll probably just walk away. But these are some of the questions that I have. So when it comes to race, I did two broadcasts because I couldn't just do one, and I couldn't do it all in one either. Because I did one where I asked where did Caucasian come from, and I did another one that asked where did Negro come from. For me, at the end of the day, if you're blind and deaf, you won't know the difference. Actually, just blind, you wouldn't know the difference.
And that made me think of the black white supremacists.
What about
What's his name? This is the comedian Dave Chappelle.
Okay.
Yeah, he has a skit where he plays. He's a blind person, and he's a white supremacist. I mean, I'm conflicted about it because on the one hand, it's sort of funny, but on the other hand, it has a bit of a sting to it. So I'm always conflicted about how should I respond? Should I, chuckle? And you get this sort of this belly chuckle that just wants to come out, but you're holding it back because you think that there's something kind of inappropriate. So I'm not quite sure how to feel, but it's
right.
There it is. There it is.
The struggle. It is a struggle. But in all seriousness, though, as when did you first start looking into things relating to why there are differences when it comes to race?
So,
if you can think back to when it was that you got started.
Just thinking, so the for me moving to the United States, way more than moving to the United Kingdom. When I moved to London, it was different. in all sorts of ways. It was sort of, leaving Jamaica still as a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
um, going to a foreign country and trying to figure out lots of things about this place.
Right.
So there was some sort of weirdness about it. But moving to the United States really was a shock to my system that I could not have imagined. And I think it was a moving here that sort of put myself in front of my own eyes as an object to think about. Just by looking at the landscape, looking at these differences between white people and black people, these are not surface. These are really quite deep.
Mm.
And the conflicts. I've been here 20 years. We've been here since 2000.
Right.
And I feel sometimes as if since I've been here, there's been this kind of low-level civil war between the races, that every now and then something will happen and they will get blown up. So it really was moving here and just getting a sense of just sort of the everyday aspects of living and noticing that this is really kind of strange. This race thing is deep. Of course, I'd known about race in Jamaica,
Mm-hmm.
but in Jamaica, I was a person from a family. The people who were my teachers, they looked like me. The people who ran the country, they looked like me. The doctors, they looked like me. The people with the money, they looked like me. People had good, middle class, wealthy lives. They looked like me.
Mm-hmm.
My dream for my future was one in which I would become educated, and I would have the kind of life that many of these people had. So
Right.
it wasn't beyond my psychological profile, my life history,
Mm-hmm.
that good things could happen to me. But then when I moved here, I just got this sense. I think you have to move into the United States and feel it, because some of this stuff is not talked about. It's just a way that people, as I call it, in Jamaica, the phrase "small yourself," when you take up too much space.
Small up yourself,
You
yeah.
Small yourself. I always think when people are talking about man spreading on the train, that Jamaicans on the train would just say, "Small yourself, man, small yourself." Close the legs.
Right, right.
I notice these things, and I sometimes would be puzzled. Why is this person kind of doing this, that kind of bowing down? When my mother-in-law was alive, she and her sister both moved to a retirement home in South Carolina, and we went to visit. I mean, it's a wonderful place if it still exists, and I think it does. And we went up to the food hall, and the workers there, they were all African Americans. And it was the weirdest thing to see these African American women sort of, they're asking me, if they can help me with stuff, but they're not looking at me. And it was like, "Yes, ma'am." And I'm so David, what's going on? And David said, "Well, this is part of the structure of life in the South of the United States. You find people doing this stuff." Now, I found it just all kind of weird,
Right.
that they would think that they should bow themselves to me or to my mother-in-law. And of course, my mother-in-law is a white lady, so you'd think that of course they're going to do that, because that's the culture there. But they were doing it to me too, because I wasn't from there. I was away, and I was with this family, and they had to pay respect.
Right.
And I just found it heartbreaking. I found it heartbreaking. So it was, those early years moving here and just feeling the culture. And it started by me just being puzzled, but then eventually I started to be mad, because then some of this stuff started to come at me, right? There was an expectation that I occupy a certain role, that I am an African American person because I look this way.
Right.
And I need to behave in a certain manner. And some people were a little puzzled by how you are, or people would say not very nice things around me.
Yes.
If they about white people, because if they didn't realize that my spouse was a white person. It was those early years that put me in this frame of mind where I was just constantly frustrated, constantly questioning. We were always talking about what the hell is going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so later, I would say in the last 5, 6 years, I really began to think philosophically about the frustrations that I had. And I eventually wrote a paper, which I'm still hoping to get published.
Mm-hmm.
And I've given a couple of talks about this issue, because this paper, I argue that I'm not black. And I'm making the case that I'm not black on account of what black to be black is in the United States.
Right.
And I'm saying that when you are from a place like where I'm from, and you were born and you were reared there, so you have a sense of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and you find yourself as an adult person in the United States, there's kind of a bit of cognizant and identity dissonance. It's like, what am I supposed to be in this culture? I'm not a black person by your lights, but you're thinking that I'm a crazy person for saying I'm not a black person. So,
So
yeah, that's sort of
let me ask you this: Have
sure.
you have you ever gotten the question, "Are you black or are you Jamaican?" And before you answer that, let me take care of this. Facebook Live, this is where I say goodbye to you guys over there. Use the link that's in the chat. Come on over for the remainder of the broadcast. Thank you guys for chipping in and sharing and steady. Glad to see you. How you doing? I know you're busy all the time, but good to see you. Use up the link. Come on over. Share with some people. Tell them to come. Share with your friends, the friends of your friends, the friends of your enemies, and the enemies of your friends. Tell everybody. The night shift is on. Real Talk Wednesday. It's Marlon's favorite night shift show. So Marlon is listening somewhere in the quiet. Don't worry, he's around. Big up Marlon Burrell, host of Real Rockers on Reggae Global Radio and general manager of Reggae Global Radio. Also, bless up to you, bro. All right. So Facebook Live, deuces. Take care. Come on over. Use the link in the chat. So you, Sabrina, have you shook your head and said no? You haven't been asked that question. All right. So that
It's
question has
usually
come my way.
assumed. It's usually assumed that. So with my students don't ever use racial terms when they're talking to me. It's very weird. It's sort of like this. When these issues come up, whether it's in my class or just having a conversation about the social world, what's going on, and they want to put me amongst African Americans or amongst black people, they will not use the word black. They kind of stand there and they're kind of looking down and moving their feet, on the ground. They're all uncomfortable. And they will say African Americans. Or the students who I am more familiar with, and I've talked to them about being from Jamaica, they will say, you're from Jamaica. But I've never had an experience where someone gave me an option. You're this or you're from Jamaica. There's just the assumption.
Well, I let you know that it exists. People have been asked the question, are you black or are you Jamaican? I know my cousin got it, and he was the one that really got it before me, and it kind of came my way as a result of making reference to him with asking that question. And I'm like, and this was years ago. This was back in the 90s that I was asked that first, because I guess every other time they just said, "Oh, he's Jamaican, he's not American, so he's not Black American, he's Jamaican."
Yes, I do remember that phrase. Yes.
And I kind of leave people with that. One of the other things, and it comes back to here. This one now goes back to religion, where they ask. I remember as playing drums for an Adventist church, and they were talking about the Sabbath one day and something, and I said, "Oh, that's cool. Tomorrow when I go to this other church, I'm gonna be doing something. And they said, wait, you going to another church tomorrow? I'm like, yeah. So, and somehow it got around to them asking me if I was Adventist for the first time. I had played at this church for like 7 years. For the first time, they were asking me if I was Adventist. This one person, and I was like, no, I'm not. I grew up going to church in the Salvation Army in Jamaica, and this is where I learned to play music. And no, I'm not Adventist. And they said, but you're so much like us. And I said, so am I, when you say I'm like us, are you saying that I'm like an Adventist or I'm like a Christian? Which one?
Good question.
And I left it there. and I literally walked away at that point. I said, later. And I just walked away. And I could see the puzzled look on their face as I said later. And I didn't have to look back to know that it stunned them for a moment, to have them thinking, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Or what am I doing here? And it doesn't really matter, because I've gone to many churches. As a musician, I've played in many churches. And it's some of it is quite similar. You have the Catholics saying, we're Catholic, and this is what I went to all Catholic schools in Jamaica, and this is the Catholic way, and then you have the Baptists saying one thing, and you have the Pentecostals saying one thing, and you have the Adventists saying one thing, and they're all using the same Bible.
Yes.
And so I, within myself, without even talking with anybody in particular, I got to the point where I said, so what's the difference if we're all using the same book and worshiping and praying to the same God? What a difference which denomination we went to. It's like going to it's like our thing with high schools in Jamaica. I go to the best high school. No, I go to the best high school. No, I go to the best school. And everybody claim their school as the school. Well, we all basically got the same education. CXCs roll around and we did the same CBA, SBA, school-based assessment.
You hear this stuff all the time. I mean, the United States is known for its American exceptionalism. All the presidents always say that it's the greatest country on earth. And what's interesting for me, so I listen to British radio most days. I'm listening to something on a British radio. And you will hear the British Prime Minister or someone from his cabinet saying the same thing. And you say to yourself, I'm an adult person. If you had told me that I would be an adult person hearing grown people say this in the year 2021, talk about their countries, their nations being the best nation, or their vaccine rollout is the best in the world. I'd say, no, adults wouldn't do that. That's the kind of thing that children do. Children, they're always comparing, and they're always trying to find ways to demonstrate that there are differences, and some differences are good and some are not good.
Right.
I just I couldn't have imagined that I would be living in a world in which people talk this way. And it's not cheap talk. It's talk that's supposed to have such important force behind it.
Yes.
Right? It's supposed to say something when you say that America is the greatest nation on earth. And I mean, some people hearing me say that, they might be thinking, what is wrong with this woman? Of course, it's obvious that America is the greatest nation on God's earth. I'm just wondering if they're all drinking or smoking something, because this is just madness, right? When we're talking about a nation and we're talking about patriotism, we know it can go in all kinds of direction.
Right.
But we also use that better way to talk about human beings and the traits that they have. Which amongst us are better and which amongst us should get the good stuff and which amongst us should not get the good stuff. It's really look. I think we have the ability to clearly to discern, to identify differences, but the ways in which we use it the ways in which we use the differences that are amongst us. It's generally not really for kumbaya, it's to find ways to set us apart. The religious case is a case in point. I mean, the traditions are so different,
Yeah.
and people have gone to war because these traditions are so different.
Right. Now, as we kind of teeter back and forth between the race side and the religious side, and even the countryside, under it all, we're looking at human differences.
That's right.
And it is I am of the opinion that these differences come about as a result of competition, like you were just mentioning.
Well, they might, depending on which ones we're talking about. They might, yes.
Yeah.
Or there might just be a fallout. We're talking about, let's say we're talking about cultural differences. You know, we all have the same challenges that we're trying to figure out in living, the problem of living.
Right.
You know, how do you construct a life? That's a hard thing to do. And you find yourself in Mongolia and you have certain resources on the ground and you're going to make a life from that. And you find yourself in Canada, you have certain resources on the ground and you're going to make a life from that. These are two very different lives. And in my view, I don't think it makes sense for some things for us to say that the Mongolian life is worse, not as good as the Canadian life. Right.
It funny you said that. Here we go again. When I was growing up in Jamaica and now living in the United States as an adult, I am thinking my Jamaican life was the best ever. Because I grew up, and I believe that my generation is probably the last of the generation that was raised by a village, where walking down the street, you had your parents knowing Mr. Him and Miss Her, and some of these individuals you actually call them auntie because of the relationship, or uncle because of the relationship with your parents. And no blood relation, but here's your auntie, here's your uncle. And so you had that village raising the child going on. I have been away from Jamaica since 2003. 2013. 2003, 2013. No, I don't remember. 2003. Yes, 2003. It's been so long. Jeez. That's a while. And shamefully, but I can say I only set foot on Jamaica one day. For one day since then. I haven't had the opportunity to go back home for an extended period of time. So how it is now is just based on what I see on TV and I hear people talking about. But I believe that village, my generation was the last to get raised in that kind of a mentality. I come here to the United States and people barely know neighbors. If I didn't intentionally try to speak with neighbors that I have, I would not have known them and they wouldn't know me. And I wonder what is up with that.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You say you think your life in Jamaica was better, and I don't think I've ever thought about that question in full. I think about components of my life. So there are certain things that I absolutely just miss about my life. But we were poor. You see, I
Did you know it?
Poor.
Did you know it? Did you know you were poor?
Yes.
Okay.
I was poor, such that I would, you know, when I was in primary school, I would lie about what we had at home because we were poor. We were a poor family.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we had issues with having children carrying water on their heads, for instance. You know, it all that stuff. I didn't like it then. And I reflect on that and I say, no, it didn't build courage or any good things like that. It's just the kind of thing that I wouldn't want for my niece who lives in Jamaica now. I have two, well, I have um, two. One is an adult niece and one is a little baby girl. I call her baby girl. She's 8 years old.
Okay.
And particularly my 8-year-old niece, she has a completely different life. So if we were to talk about my sister and I, when we talk about our lives as kids,
Mm-hmm.
Shania cannot envisage. It's not part of her own life because she has a middle class life
Right,
with
right.
her parents.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't miss those things, but I do miss. I was a fairly I was part of my community. I was part of my school. I was kind of known in my town in Grange Hill. And it's interesting, as an adult, you could not pay me to live amongst lots of people. Like, we live out in the boonies. We have land and we have space. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yes,
Yes.
this is what I want, right? So it's interesting that, that very kind of involved in your face Jamaican life that we had, which, by the way, I needed respite from. And my mother was very sensitive to that. She understood then that sometimes I needed to be by myself to sort of pull myself back together.
Right.
So I don't miss certain elements, the things that I had to do as a kid, but there is sort of a social an aspect to the social life there that is completely not a part of American life.
Mm-hmm.
I have good friends here. I have colleagues that I'm really comfortable and close with. Two of my colleagues, Ruth Sample and Charlotte Witt, they're fantastic ladies, and I feel completely at ease with them.
Yes.
But apart from them, really, my life here is very non-involved with most human beings. I find it a very difficult culture to make friends in.
After
Right.
20
But
years?
it's also it could also be because I'm an adult, right? And I'm looking for different things in friends relations.
Right.
So there could be that. But I know what you're talking about. I know this way of living in Jamaica that I think you and I had that, and my sister. But
Right.
that's not there anymore as far as I understand.
And so now you get into another side. Is it because of the whole cable TV and the way of life in foreign, quote unquote foreign,
Yes.
being brought into our living rooms and on our devices, our smart
Absolutely.
devices?
There's no question that's part of it. So you might remember that when you were a kid in Jamaica, you woke up in the morning, if it wasn't during the school term, you went to school, you came home, and you're out of the house, and unless you're doing homework or something like that.
Yeah.
But sitting in the house wearing out the sofa
That's
just
not a
was
thing to do.
beyond the
No.
pale, right?
No, it didn't
No.
happen.
And now, of course, my niece is in the house doing exactly that. And it's not just because of COVID. It's,
Right.
Before COVID, it was going to school, coming home, and being indoors. I think so we have this view that cultures are sort of these firm, fixed things. They're not. Cultures are dynamic, and there are lots of things coming in and going out. So when people talk about appropriation and certain people shouldn't wear braids, and I'm like, come on, look at the fashion that you find in Jamaica that wasn't part of Jamaican culture 20 years ago, but
Yes.
which came to Jamaica from other places, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cultures aren't fixed things. And so I think what's going on in Jamaica is life has transformed. Most people in many places in Jamaica, people have amenities. They have televisions at home. They have cable. They have cell phones. So there's more space in their lives for leisure.
Right.
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 And of course, you also have, for some parts of Jamaica, you have the issue where people don't feel safe.
Yes.
So that too means that being at home, being with family, is the thing to do rather than to be out there. But I think it's just an aspect of the dynamicness of culture and change.
Right. So when we look on at ourselves. When you go to work, you go onto campus at the University of New Hampshire, and you walk in there, and students don't know who you are.
Initially, yes.
The ones that don't know who you are,
Mm-hmm.
what is that engagement like? Because I think New Hampshire, and I'm thinking, boy, that's four. It's not even far. That's four, and that's kind of white. you know, So when you walk onto that campus, what is that engagement like?
It's perfectly normal. Perfectly normal. I have had in my time at UNH, I've had a really bad experience with a student who, this is a student who just could not, I mean, he appeared to have been puzzled, literally puzzled, that I could be a professor. Now he asked me questions like, so they have good schools in Jamaica to prepare you to go to universities abroad, and before. But here's a weird thing. Part of what happens with me too, which can be frustrating, but I also think it's the perspective that I bring to some of these discussions is really different and important. Initially, I didn't experience this as anything but someone being curious, because let's put it this way, this is not a very precocious person,
Right.
Someone who lives a very insular life. And so, in fact, it's not beyond the pale that he wouldn't have understood it, that it could have been just a weird thing. This is 2014, 2015.
Right.
It really could have been the case that he was genuinely puzzled. And the kind of person that I am initially, I was just engaging with him. I was like, yes, yes. But then I realized, because he kept coming back, he kept coming to my office hours, and he just was, the puzzle just wasn't lifting. That he literally seemed to be puzzled that I could have a brain in my head. And from when I realized what was going on, that this had some weirdness to it, then I didn't want to engage with him about these questions anymore. And our dynamic, the class dynamic, changed, and it became actually a hostile situation for me and for some of the other students. But that was the only experience I've had at UNH where I would say this was problematic. I have had experiences where students were genuinely curious, but they don't have the language to ask me these questions. And what I am, because you cannot live in the United States where the message is a certain thing. Namely, if you are an African American person, then your prospects are going to be less than, for the most part, a Caucasian person.
Right.
This is the message. And no one has written it, no one has said it, or very few people will ever say that. But it's
like,
the backbone of the culture here.
It's like an unspoken truth.
Absolutely. It's well established. So you cannot have that and then be puzzled by people who manifest that to you in your one-on-one engagement with them. Some of them will be brave enough to do that. And sometimes I think, I don't see my job as one of schooling anybody about the fact that I'm a human being, and therefore the mere fact of being a human being and the fact that we grant to human beings certain basic rights, certain basic ways of being. We just grant it to them.
Yes.
I don't have any desire to say to anyone, please, I have these abilities. Please, you see, I really do have 10 fingers. Oh my God, I have to. I don't have any desire to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Insofar as someone might look at me and say, she's not a fully a person or a proper or adequate person or whatever. I'm not particularly interested in converting them. But there are some people, some young people,
Mm-hmm.
who initially might just, one of the things, for instance, my student evaluations sometimes are not great. And I will tell you that one of the reasons they're not great, my students don't know what to make of me. And this is weird that I'm saying this, right? I'm saying this on a radio show.
Mm.
I'm not afraid to say it. Very often they don't know what to make of me. So I'm in the classroom and, for instance, they have a problem, not one they articulate, but this is a problem that they have, that I don't take control of their learning and their lives. That
Mm.
I see them as adult people who've come to my classes, and my job is to assist them on their educational journeys. And they have certain responsibilities.
Right.
And one of those, for instance, is to step up, to come and see me, to talk to me, to be involved. That I don't think learning takes place by me pouring information at you. That classes must be dynamic. They must involve the giving and taking.
Right.
That as an instructor, I can learn from them and they can learn from me. That things have to be fluid. And sometimes they don't know what to do with me because the norm here is very different. And I am not, I haven't conformed to this particular norm. I am Subrena in how I am as an instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And for some students, it doesn't work. And then for some other students, oh my God, it's the best thing that's ever happened to them.
Because
So,
it's enlightening.
yes, because I think a lot of students that come to university and they come to, this is the one time in their lives when they will get an opportunity to press at those questions that they've kind of looked at before, but they haven't had a chance to. And so
Mm.
here they have someone who is, one thing I will tell you, I am enthusiastic. I'm like, we come to the classroom to play with ideas,
Right.
right? We don't come here to do any kind of a shaming, and you should be expanded and feel stretched, but you shouldn't find it so difficult you want to run away, right? The learning environment should be conducive to your getting something of substance to enhance your life in some way,
Yes.
to enhance you from where you are. And so, what I think some students find me a strange kind of professor. I will jump up and down. I will demonstrate with my body in ways that perhaps other professors don't. I will walk in the classroom with a paper bag to illustrate a point that over my head. Want to illustrate a point that is somehow well done with a paper bag over my head, and sometimes they don't know what to do with this. So
Mm.
typically they don't really laugh at jokes. They're kind of polite.
Right.
But I find that when my students get to know me, when they become comfortable with me, when they come to understand that what I want from them is for them to use me as their instructor to get from their experience at UNH that which will enhance their lives. They will get a degree,
Mm-hmm.
so they will be credentialed to get a job, but they will understand, for instance, that we're all walking around with ideas in our heads, and these ideas play a role in how we treat each other.
Right.
So you don't have to be, quote unquote, a racist. You can just be someone who's being marinated in this culture, and after all, you are. And you therefore believe that little black boys who are not sitting at ease in your kindergarten class, that something is wrong with them because they're little black boys, rather than think of them as, well, did they have sugar this afternoon or what's going on, right?
Mm.
You're not apt to think of those things. And what's going on, part of what's going on is that you have this cultural baggage, this cultural knowledge
Right.
that that really provides us the basis to interpret what's going on in our world. So that's what my students are doing. My students are not silly. They're interpreting the world based on the information that they have been told. And my job and our job is to try and show them through instruction that the stories that they have been told are problematic on multiple levels. So I never tell my students that, this person is wrong and that person is wrong. I say, let's walk through this, let's do some logic on it, let's think through this case, and let's see if this makes sense. Why would you imagine that because I'm clothed in this skin, the very fact that I'm clothed in this skin, that my brain is somehow deficient? In what respect?
Right.
Right? So when you engage with them in this way, when you say, how do you know? Suppose you say you're going to, assess my ability as a thinker. What kind of formula, what kind of method are you going to use? And how will you decide whether what your method reveals tells you something about the smallness, for instance, of my brain, or the kind of genes that I've been given, and so on and so forth, right? I think sometimes we don't talk in explicit ways about these things. And so, we say racism and the conversations, they shut down.
Mm.
And I often say to my students, tell me more. How do you see this going?
Right.
Tell me why you think biology would have done it like that. And how would the biology work? Give me a story about the biology. So the onus is on them, and they realize that rather than me having to justify my existence as a person who is different from them on the campus, I say to them, tell me how the biology would reveal to you that something about me makes me not a good candidate to be your instructor. And that just blows their mind because they have never had the thought that this could be a question for them to contemplate. So your original question was, what is it like there? I've had a really bad experience. And I think many of my students don't know what to make of me.
Right.
But I think in general, it's a perfectly fine university to be at. It has some of the issues that I think are plagued by the United States. Students are very, for the most part, very afraid to speak about racial matters. These things they poke out. They're like little wounds, little pimples on people's heads that, every now and then you get sort of liquid oozing out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when these things happen, I take these little opportunities to engage with the students in a manner that doesn't shame them.
Yes.
But gets them to think about these issues.
I have a couple of comments here in the chat. One of them here saying, men and women, we have our differences, blacks, whites, all colors and shades in between, countries and beliefs, leaders in each sowing seeds and reaping fields of fear and suspicion, feeding our division and taking control of our hearts, minds, and souls, parceled, bought, and sold to gain what votes they can for power. Our need for identifying or rejecting someone as one or another, and another thing just came in and scroll it, roll it. Our need for identifying or rejecting someone as one thing or another, or not, to feel we belong, are accepted and loved, or better than, is non-contributive and is counterintuitive to us all. Getting along, and it is wrong. It further divides and encourages the fight to fit in, be accepted, and counted with equal rights when we already belong. All of, as one, to the one, human race. And until we embrace each other in love and fight for each other and ourselves. Now, this is written somewhat like how David would write. This is written like how David talks. you know? And it is concluded with we will never succeed to be as strong as meant to be, and eventually all that's weak will be gone. One love. You know, that kind of writing, it speaks to my core the way how when I talk with David, that's what I get from him. And that's what I get from you too as we talk.
But some people would say that is a bunch of Pollyanna hogwash, that it's all pretty words and talking about humankind and all this stuff, that you're not dealing with the reality. On the ground, life's not like that. Let's really talk about the facts here, people. What's the matter with you? I'm not saying that's my view. I'm saying that kind of a position is clearly the position that a vast number of people don't adhere to, right? That they are happy to see the differences, to emphasize the differences, to use the differences as a source of conflict, to use the differences to apportion resources, right? There are plenty of people for whom this idea of humankind, that we are all one, is just a foolish idea. Now, here's the thing. I don't actually think that there is anything wrong with differences.
Right.
And obviously the fact that we use our differences to have these battles, it means that it's the kind of thing that human beings can and do in fact do, right? We can do this. But we also have other impulses. We can reject the impulse we have to pull ourselves apart on account of these differences and go to war and have this kind of a social upheaval because of them.
Yes.
Right? So I don't think that we have to say, well, we want to be different kind of people in that we don't even think in those ways. You can genuinely say of a person, oh my, that person is so different. And that is all that you're saying, that they're different. You're not evaluating the difference that you observe as good or bad. You're simply noting it. The problem in the United States is that so many of these things are used as a weapon that we're going to hit the other team with. We're going to hit the other person with.
Yes.
And it's very hard to have a country and a people, one people. Because, people are in a nation, if nothing else, they're one. They belong to the same nation. It's very hard to have that when there are so many opportunities that people are taking to pull these differences, to use these differences for discord.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on how I one of the ways I address this whole race thing also. Another comment here. Subrena, you are... Where is it? I just lost it. Someone complimenting you here. Greetings, Subrena. You are an eccentric soul. Thanks for being different. # Black Girls Rock. International Woman of Change. International woman who challenges us to think outside the square. I love that. These comments that I'm getting in the chat tonight are like next level. Thank you guys commenting. Thank you. And I think you can add this to a way that you describe yourself, an international woman of change. That challenges us, not even encourages, it challenges us to think outside the square.
My goal is to challenge, not to, I want to challenge the space. I want us to sit back and think and think and think. I don't
Yes.
want to be a guru, as I was saying with my colleagues the other day. I want to encourage people to think, because we all do it and we all can do it.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I say all the time on this broadcast is my job is to stimulate your appetite and not satisfy your hunger. So when I'm done, you should be asking more questions than you came in with.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if I don't do that and you get answers, all the answers you're looking for from one broadcast that I have done, then I'm not doing something right. And
I agree with that sentiment exactly. I very often when I'm teaching, I'll ask my student about some historical event, and they won't know about it. So um, this morning I taught one of David's class. I was a guest in his class, and I asked the student about if they know about Henrietta Lacks. And some students had heard of Henrietta Lacks, so some students had not heard.
right,
And the ones who did, I asked them to talk about it, and they did. And I could see, because we're all doing Zoom teaching, right? I could
right,
see that the other students, because of what they were hearing from their peers, they were all curious and they were Googling.
right, right,
Typically, I don't, if they don't know about this thing, I'll say, okay, that's your homework. And their homework is to go and find out, use Google, and the next class, when we get back to the next class, hopefully I'll remember, and before I start class, I'll say, okay, so X, tell us about Henrietta Lacks.
right.
I want people to fill it out for themselves. There's something about, you learn by doing, I think, that exercising that cognitive ability rather than sort of sitting back and being given the information.
Right.
I think you develop there's a different relationship with the information when you find the
Yes.
information, when you were invested in looking for it. So
Right.
I like that sentiment very much. Yes.
Now, for me, one of the things that when it comes to people separating, segregating, using race, is I ask the question, if it so happens that you need an organ transplant, do you know where this organ is coming from? And does it matter if it's a successful transplant which saves your life? Does it matter where it came from? If it came from if you're white and it came from a black person or vice versa, do you now say, I cannot use this organ because it came from this person of another race?
There was a time when people held those views and would say, though, explicitly, I don't want it. I don't want any black blood because it's going to be black somehow. I don't think. Let me put it this way. Many people would not say anything like that nowadays. But I think some people, even though they wouldn't say that, I think there are some people who would, at the very least, because they have these discomforts,
Right.
about the races, that they might initially not be entirely at ease hearing that the heart that you're going to get is from a person of color, or from a white person, or from a Native American, or from a Chinese person, or something like that. Some people might not initially be comfortable with that idea, but I don't think so much, and I could very well be wrong. I don't think that we would have explicit rejection of a vital organ on account of the organ coming from a person of a different race nowadays. Well, at least I hope not.
I should hope not.
I hope not in these year 21st century that this wouldn't be the case. But I could be wrong.
Well, you and I both have the same hope that you're wrong. Really. Another comment here. I am different and I want differences to be acknowledged. I want my differences to be acknowledged. If I were like everyone else, I would be a boring individual. I was not created to be boring or normal or like anyone else. Each of us are created to be our unique selves. One of the struggles that I think people have with that is, yes, they want to identify as individual, but at the same time, they want to identify as an individual as a part of a similar collective. So,
That's right.
so here we are, and it comes back to wanting to be inclusive, and
Yes.
the way to end up having a well sought after club, so to speak, is to say, well, this is an exclusive club, and you need to be X, Y, and Z to get in.
Yes, 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 yes.
And nobody in that club could have any of those could meet any of those requirements. They just the people that got together and said, "Hey, let's form this club and let's say this is what it takes to come in."
Exactly, exactly.
And as such, it now becomes this exclusive club. But at the core of it all, everybody can have that same club. And you know, these it's interesting when you don't have a sense of self, but you want to identify as an individual, and you want others to somewhat be like you. It's kind of crazy to me. And I see people doing this over
Yes.
and over and over again, and I don't know if they realize that they're doing it.
Oh yes. I think you're hitting at something that is so key. There is this kind of tension, difference within certain parameters,
Right,
right?
right.
So, look, I want to be this kind of a person. I want to be unique. I want to be the kind of person who is going to stand out. If
Yes.
you have a life online, for instance, if you're someone in the Instagram world, for instance, what is a term that people use? Brand, brand.
Yes, the
To have
branding.
a brand, by
Branding is
definition,
important, you know.
is to be in some sense separate and apart from.
Right.
Right? It needs to be special. It needs to be novel. It needs to be the kind of thing that people want to be a part of. But at the same time, you can't be completely outside of the framework, right?
Right.
So if you're going to be an Instagram star and if you're going to be doing makeup, well, you have to do makeup to faces. Nobody's going to be, even if your makeup skills are really, really super interesting, no one is going to find them interesting if you end up putting makeup on the back of your back. On your back. Nobody's going to be
Yes.
interested in that, even if it's beautiful work. So it has to be makeup, and it has to be makeup done on people's faces.
Right.
So the framework is there. You're working within it, and you're gonna sort of make some changes to the established way of doing things. So that people can come along and think of themselves as interesting and unique if they wear this and do this and so on and so forth. But always, we don't want to be too much of a different person, because that's going to mean that we're excluded. Right? And so there's this question: how much difference? How much do you want to be different? My own personal view about these matters is, I'm not afraid as an individual to push the standards as far as I can push them. I'm not so interested in working within the mold. And one of the things about academia, which is very peculiar, there are some hard and fast norms in academia.
Right.
Academic writing is not like writing in newspapers. There's a particular kind of voice that you have to assume. And when I go to write academically, my intuition, my natural inclination is to be more literary than to be in this academic style. So for me, part of what I have to do in writing is to conform myself to an academic way of writing and set aside my literary ways of writing. But every now and then I will write something that reflects that I have a comfort, that I have a preference for doing things in a literary manner. Um, so, I want to be an academic. I am an academic. I'm working within the framework. I have to stay within the framework, but I still try nonetheless and push the boundaries as far as I can get.
Right.
And I'm sure the longer I stay in the profession, the more I will be expanding the ways in which I write. I probably will be writing a novel as an academic piece of philosophy at some point in my future. I don't know if anyone will accept it, but that would be my dream.
I'm
So
pretty sure
yes,
it would be.
this tension between being different and being a part of, it's ever present.
Yeah, and I'm actually very fascinated by it. Actually, to be honest, I'm quite fascinated by it. And when you first met David, let me tip over to a little bit of a personal side. When you first met David, did you, before you got to know him, when you saw him, did you see him as, oh, this is going to be interesting because this is someone different?
I met my spouse in a jazz bar in London.
Oh,
Yes. Smolensky's on the Strand, which is no longer, it's not there anymore. I don't think it's in existence anymore.
okay.
Um, and I went up to the bar to get a drink, and he was at the bar, and we got to talking, and I liked him immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he was just the kindest. In that brief time I talked with him, I could discern that he was just a kind, gentle human being.
Mm-hmm.
So it was sort of instantaneous that I saw those qualities in him, which are qualities that I'm really drawn toward. Not that, it's everyone is kind and nice. No, this is a specific kind of trait that that he has. It's very explicit. And the more I got to know him, you had better believe that he's unlike any person that I had ever met or had a relationship with. So, I mean, to this day, I say to him, honestly, you're so different. And sometimes it's a complimentary, you're so different, and sometimes it's not complimentary. Sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, how could you do that?
Right.
Or how could you not know that, for instance? How could you not notice that you wore two different shoes to school, for instance? Yes. So he is he's a very interesting person to live with. I tell David this all the time, that I spend hours of my life trying to figure out, how did he manage to do that, where that is all kinds of different things that he's done, the many projects that he's juggling, or something that he's done in the house, some kind of a clever trick that he's done. He is the chef of the family.
Oh
How
my
did he make
goodness.
that?
Is he ever?
Oh, he's the chef of the family. Oh, he is the chef of the family. It is extraordinary.
And I'm only seeing it on social media. You are getting to enjoy it.
It is extraordinary. It's sometimes I'm like, I don't understand it. How did you do that? How did you make that? No formal training. I guess anyone can make these things, but I don't have a feel for cooking. So I do find it quite interesting that he makes many of the things that he makes. But I was initially drawn to him because there was a sense of him being the kind of person who was not like the other people that I had met in my past.
Right.
And therefore, I was curious to learn more about him. And he's not ceased to be a very interesting person to live with.
That makes it fun all the time. Talking with you and going back to talking with him, you know, I'm just drawn to talk more. To and it is not that. Yes, it is that I am absorbing more. I'm learning more, but I'm also expressing more because
Yes.
it's this open mind and this open-ended dialogue that we get to explore life.
Mm-hmm.
Quite similar to what you say to your students that you're going to explore academia, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And someone someone in the chat says, I say the same thing, but I use weird instead of different.
Oh my God. Oh
I've been called
gosh.
weird. I've been called weird before.
Oh God.
I don't
I
know.
have been called weird by my students, but in a sort of in a nice way, you
Yeah,
know.
but anything that you're
Yeah.
not familiar with, I guess, would fall under the weird category. It is not
Yes. Yeah.
the quote unquote norm that
Exactly.
you are used to. Another comment here: I do not need others to be exclusive. I'm exclusive all by myself. I'm creating my own path by providing that one thing that no one else provides to a specific market and be the best at it. If that is not a formula for individuals to live by, I
Hmm.
don't know what is. Because, one, it creates a sense of individuality,
Hmm.
and two, it creates a sense of needing to belong to a group because you're providing something that is needed.
Yes. Yes.
And in
So
providing something that
yes.
is needed, you are meeting a need of your own.
Yes.
And people look at,
Yeah.
I don't think people that provide services see things that way. That,
No.
that
No. But
in,
indeed, it is what they're doing. Yes.
yeah, because it is a need to give what you have to someone
Yes.
else that needs to receive what you have. But all they see it as is meeting the needs of those who are receiving what they have to give. No,
Yes.
it's a need that is on both ends, and we often
Absolutely.
miss things like this. And
Yeah,
I'm
part of it is because of the nature of our transactional doings, right? So I'll pay
tell
for
me
it. You
about
just
it.
yeah. We don't think. I mean, I think during the initial stages of COVID, there was some sense. I think there was some recognition that this mutual um, social exchange, the social exchanges that we engage in, that they're really vital and their absence were felt.
Yes.
I think David's told me that he still can't purchase paper towels online. It's just extraordinary that that's the case, right? We used to be able to purchase. We always get our paper towel in large quantities,
Yeah.
as well as toilet tissue. And the idea that, well, you go to the supermarket and he can only get a certain amount at the supermarket and you can't get them online. There are other kinds of products that we use in our daily lives that we can't get anymore. So indeed, we're supplying, people have talked about how much money Jeff Bezos has made during this COVID crisis. But many of the things that we've purchased. These are things that we've needed to live our lives.
Right.
And I don't think we would have thought about those things in those ways had, COVID didn't visit itself on us. Because typically it's like, I'm paying for it and I just want the product, and that's the end of the story.
Right.
But really, it's this sort of mutual transactional relationship that I benefit, and thank God you're there so that I can get paper towels and laundry detergent and all the stuff that we need to live our lives,
Right. Right.
toothpaste, you know, all these things that we need. And you get my money.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, all these human differences is what? Just a facade. It's just a state of mind from a misconception of being.
No, I think that
What is it?
I think that they are real and are we see them, we live with them, we experience them. Um, uh, that they're there, and what we end up using them for. That's where these questions and these worries come about from. But
Got you.
I just take it as a matter of course that, my colleagues and I are different people on many levels. And yet, we get together every Friday via Zoom to have our cocktails. And we have these wonderful conversations, and we agree about some things and we disagree about some things. We love each other. We care for each other. We want each other to thrive in our lives. But there are these differences. Charlotte, forever the diplomat, and Ruth is the sort of champion, the fighter, the person who is going to go to battle and figure things out. And, she wants to know why this is this way. Why is the money being spent this way? I don't understand why the money is being spent this way. And I'm there in between them. And sometimes I agree with Ruth, and sometimes I'm like, Ruth, I disagree with you, Ruth. I disagree with you, Ruth. And sometimes I'm like, I think Charlotte's right. It's wonderful. Friday evenings in all three of our homes, it's just awesome because we have these cocktail hours. They start at 5 and they can go any place from 5 to 7:30. We're just talking and drinking about everything and anything. It's wonderful. We're three women of three different stages in our career, three different ages. Two of them are racialized white ladies, and one of them is a racialized black lady. One is from Jamaica and two from the United States via Finland. Charlotte was born in Finland but never lived there. Really interesting stuff.
Right.
Yeah, and I absolutely adore them. I adore them.
That's an awesome dynamic right there. And when you can find a connection like that, you can't help but to hold on to it and cherish it, and honor it and respect it. I absolutely love the concept of David and Subrena, and or in fact, I can even extend it to Barash and Smith. I love the concept because I can see the mental gears turning, and all the ticker tape coming out of that computer with all these readouts. I can see it happening, and
So
I am tickled with the thought of it. I listen to you, and you remind me a lot of Paul Campbell. And I'm not sure if you know who Paul Campbell is. If you saw the movie The Lunatic,
I have not.
you need to see the movie The Lunatic. It is the classic Jamaican movie. It's up there with The Harder They Come, with Smile Orange. It's up there.
Huh.
The Lunatic, Paul Campbell.
I'm sure it is it's on Amazon or Netflix.
You can see it on YouTube in its entirety.
Oh, I'm sure he's getting it prepared.
But talking with you remind me of not Paul Campbell in any character, but Paul Campbell as himself. And you can check through in my archives. I spoke with him a little over a month ago. The last time I spoke with him.
So he's a Jamaican actor?
He is Jamaican, yes.
So it's interesting because there was a friend of mine who lived in Grangeville in my town.
Mm-hmm.
I believe his surname was Campbell. Paul Campbell was his name. I don't think it's the same person. Well, unless he became an actor years later, but Paul Campbell wasn't an actor.
Well, this Paul Campbell is. And he talking with you and some of the ways that you view life and you take on life, the similarities. I'm like, this is so familiar to me.
Huh.
And I don't know if you
Interesting.
will see it when you
Huh.
go back to one of those broadcasts. Hopefully David sees it and says, no, I can see what Kevin is talking about,
I see. I
so that I
see.
don't seem like I'm crazy. But let me see. There's a comment here in the chat before we parts company, and I do a little musical therapy to close out the night shift week. Um, I wasn't saying there's anything wrong with being an individual, nor wanting to identify with others, to not feel alone in our individuality. But when we are working to be recognized,
Hmm.
um, when we're working to be recognized for our human rights, it is giving those who would deny us those rights the ammunition to see us
Yeah.
differently and find
Yes.
all sorts of things, such as in the Bible, to argue against. When we all need to oh, when we all need to say is that it cut off some of the text. Oh, I think some of the text got cut off.
Said it
Is that we are
best.
human and deserve the same rights as the rest of humans. That's what it is.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, 29. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, at the end of the day, and this
At
this
the
this
end of
now
the day.
takes us back to what I was saying about the organ exchange, the organ transplant. At the
Yes.
end of the day, if you're
Hmm.
blind, you can't tell what that person looks like. If they're Oriental, if they're Hispanic, if they're black, if they're white, you cannot tell.
Hmm.
If you're deaf, you don't know how they sound differently. Yeah, you can see that there are differences,
Hmm.
but you can't hear that there's a difference.
Yes.
One of the things that really reminded me of the melting pot that Jamaica is I walked into a club here in South Florida, and there was a live taping of a broadcast, and the guest was a white man, and then he spoke.
Yes.
And I was like, blouse and skirt, I walk on. I was like, yo. It's not that I'm not familiar with this, I just didn't expect it.
Oh, of course, of course. Blouse and skirt.
You know,
That's brilliant. I've heard that one in a long time. I think I just recently in the last couple of months I think I introduced that one to David.
blouse
I
and skirt?
think so. I think so because he knows the other ones and I don't remember how and I said there's a new one. I said blouse and skirt. Of course I didn't say blouse and skirt and uh, it's a challenge sometimes getting him to pitch them in a manner that really brings out their essence because there's a way you have to say them to bring out their essence,
Right,
right?
right, right. He'll get it. He'll get it. You know, the
Yes.
way he's cooking, he'll get it.
That's true.
Sabrina, I want to thank you for taking the time out again to come and share this time and this space with me and with us. For those that want to reach you and to read some of the material that you have been involved with and in,
Mhm.
how can people contact you? How can people find what you have been doing and have done?
Easiest way, I think, is to email me, Sabrina.Smith at unh.edu.
That's easy enough.
That is very easy, yes.
And for those
I
that
don't
are
have a lot of
listening,
presence online. I'm notionally on Facebook, but I don't really go there much.
right?
So that's the best way to email me.
Yeah.
First name dot, second name at unh.edu.
And for those that are listening and not seeing how her name is spelled, it's an SU for Sabrina.
That's
Not,
right.
not
Subrena.
yes. It's not like the teenage witch. It's
That's right.
it's Sabrina. not
Yes.
Sabrina. So it's
And also not an I. So I think
yes,
it's best to say it's
E.
Subrena.
Yes,
So it's different on two levels,
right,
not an A and not an I.
right. And one more comment here in the chat. Imagine being the only person in a country and western bar in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Oy, 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 oy.
Whoa.
Oy, 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 oy. Look, it might be fun. It might be fun. We were up in Scotland, away from lots of normal things in a pub, and we heard people talking. And typically when I hear Scottish people talk, I sort of need
A translator?
a translator.
Yes.
And these people were having a jolly good time, and they were curious about me, and it was not offensive. It was genuine curiosity without any of the offense, and we had a good time there. It was fun. It really was fun.
Well, 960 is saying this was scary. Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Only black person in a country and western bar. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I can do that one. I'm not. There are
that
just some
that would
places.
be that would be difficult.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's some places in the United States where I barely want to say the name, let alone to visit. And it's sad in 2021 to be making a statement like that. But here's the thing, that's the reality.
It is a reality. It is a reality. And I think being cautious is not a bad attitude to have, and not a bad practice. It's a good practice.
Yeah,
Cautiousness, appropriate cautiousness.
right. Sabrina, thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
David, thank you for the link up. And I should say, David, thank you for the link up to David. And David, thank you for the link up to Sabrina.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed myself. And thank you, folks who've been listening. And I guess have people been watching? If they have,
Yes,
thank
yes.
you. Thank you. I
People have
hope
been watching.
I gave you some things to think about.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
That's what it.
yes. And, this particular installment of the night shift, Real Talk, this is what it's all about. It is the real talk. It's how we interact with each other. And some of the psychology behind it, some of the physiology behind it, some of the things that we don't question.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, really and truly, it's just an extension of me. The three broadcasts are just bits of me that I need answers to some questions, and I get to ask them out loud. So
Fantastic.
thank you for helping me in addressing this aspect of this question of
Sure.
human differences.
Sure.
And
Thank you.
fortunately for us, we have more questions than we do answers. So we get to do this again and again and again. And I'll say this right now as I have you on this broadcast. I said it with David Smith. I definitely need to get you all on one
Together.
call. And I wouldn't even know how to set it up, as in to present it before.
Yeah.
But as I'll figure it out, I just need to make it happen.
Okay.
So, Barash, if you're listening, line up yourself. I know David Smith is listening.
Yes. Yes.
We just need to make it happen. Thank you again. Y'all take care. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the rest of the week. We will be in touch.
Take care. Thanks.
All right, you too. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Subrena Smith. Dr. Subrena Smith. What a woman. Boy, I All I can say is, what a woman. I'm gonna take a quick little break. Let me see, 8 minutes to the top of the one. No, we're not taking a break. We're just going straight into it. Musical therapy. Let's close out the week. This is Christina Alicia. The track is called Black Diamond.
So you feeling a little pressure? Heat at wada wada. What you mean this is a depression? Turn around and it's just compression. Path of destiny will have volcanic eruptions. Everything in life have a purpose. Yeah. Like diamond in the rough. Yes, it's tough, but this pressure is what you need right now. Embrace the path and you will last. Like diamond, don't you see? When you rise, you will be that diamond everyone wants to see. See the vision ahead, write it plain and clear. Plant a seed of maize, then trust it to spread. Guard your heart and keep it clean. Forgive, release the pain. Everything in life have a purpose. Yeah, like diamond in the rough. Yes, it's tough, but
Okay, 960.
there is one.
So 960 says, with being the only black person in this country and western club
Don't you see?
in Hattiesburg, Mississippi,
You will be.
got up and started doing the electric slide, and a lot of them joined in. There you go, 960. You show them that you're not that different from them after all. This is Paul Anthony working out with the Stamina All Stars.
I spread through the TV station.
It's called Mr. Misleader.
The lips of Satan. You know, she said that I divide the nation.
5 minutes to the top of the hour.
Evil lies. Can't you see where the evil lies?
Christine is singing about you, 960. I get it.
It ain't hard to find.
I can dig it.
Mr. Misleader. Master.
You go on, Black Diamond.
Mr. Misleader. Maniacal motivator. You think that we can see through your disguise? Master. Talk a good one, but behind you are brutalized. No one can scrutinize you. You don't know what it means to be wrong and carry on living in a delusional existence. You say you are champion, no, political bad man. Yeah. Sad to see the casualty. Enough of them still believe everything you say every day. Some of them just pretend like this is all okay. A time now for break free of the mental chains, or it's all going up in flames. Hey, yo, Mr. Misleader, Master Manipulator.
As we close out this night shift week, I want to thank you all for hanging out. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your participation. I encourage you to be mindful of those in your community.
Merciless murder.
Yeah, man, your community is not just the development that you live in, it spreads far and wide. So those that you pass on the bus, on the plane, on the boat, or the train, whether you walk, ride, or drive, these are members of your community. Do something good for one of them today, because you never know who's going to do something good for you tomorrow. My name is DJ Kevin Stewart, so I like to do it to you, for you, and with you every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern. And you can join me on Saturdays also on ReggaeGlobalRadio.com for the Saturday Stew, in which I have that secret ingredient.
Master Manipulator, Mr. Misleader, Maniacal Motivator, Mr. Misleader.
It's on a Paul Anthony, it's called Mr. Misleader. I bounce out with this one, it's Hal Anthony.
They don't know how to do things right. Teach them, judge, and teach them.
It's called Illumination.
Unite, Lord. 'Cause all them I do is fuss and fight. They don't know how to do things right.
Until we meet again.
Teach them to unite, Lord.
Y'all take care of yourselves. Be good.
They don't know.
If you can't be good at it.
I'm calling on you, John.
Good morning, good afternoon, good day to you wherever you are in the world, from right here in South Florida. I bid you a good night.
For a very, very, very long time, Lord. Nationality or religion. Let us all come together to fight this holy Armageddon, Lord. Teach them, Judge, and say, teach them to unite, Lord. 'Cause all them I do is fuss and fight. They don't know how to do things right. Some people do the crime and afraid of serving the time. While innocent people in life who did not commit any crime have pity on their own job, 'cause the chosen of you, Lord. Teach them, Judge, and say, teach them to unite, Lord. 'Cause all them I do is fuss and fight. They don't know how to do things right.
Yes, my people, check out I Red Funks on Reggae Global Radio every Saturday at 8 p.m. with Kev Stew, where I'll give you a pre-life, brand new, good for you. Kick it like a ball if you don't see a dance hall. You hear that?
Greetings and salutations, one and all. You're invited to tune in to the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew. It airs on Mondays with Community and Finance, Tuesdays with Healthy Love, and Wednesdays with Real Talk from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Come spend some time interacting in the stew pot, where we keep things bubbling and wind down in musical therapy. The night shift with DJ Kevin Stew is on kevinstew.com, where you're encouraged to have acceptance through enlightenment. Greetings and salutations. This is DJ Kevin Stew inviting you to bubble up and simmer down with me in the Saturday Stew right here on Reggae Global Radio. Get ready for the special segment called The Secret Ingredient, where you may hear from your favorite artist or producer. Saturday Stew happens every Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time exclusively on ReggaeGlobalRadio.com, where we get high on reggae.